And that begs the question, are there just a few bad apples or is it part of police culture?
Where's the accountability? Where is the reform when it comes to police? But Ken, the big question is, where is the change after all these decades?
And that's part of what we're going to talk about now. Let's start with our panel. Antoinette Edwards, I saw that during the piece, you were very emotional about recalling these stories. So just give me your thoughts and what you think we can do when we see these incidents happen over and over again. Okay, let me direct that question. Antoinette, you're on mute right now. We'll come back to you. Just make sure that you turn your audio on. Let me throw that question to CJ Robbins.
It sounds like
I don't think we're on mute.
Yeah, no, we're not muted on our end here. I can hear.
We can hear.
Okay. Is Antoinette on now?
Yes, I'm on. I'm still on, Ken.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Antoinette, you were very emotional during that piece. Tell me why and what you think we can do moving forward.
As I was sharing, I really appreciate when you said it's a new chapter, but it's that same old story. So how do we move forward? And what I think we can do now, what we must do now, is there's no more casual acceptance for racism. And what we can do, people with privilege and power, it's not to shame you or damn you, but use who you are and what you have to do what you can. That's a kind of a basic general. There's so much that we can do, and I'm really grateful to have this awesome panel that's doing the work, but everybody can do something, because all of those incidents, it sounds like you're somewhere else, but we're right here in Portland when that happened. And I work with some of those families that you've talked about. So there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot of reform. And I know you're going to talk, I'm looking at the panel, so I'd like to share that with them, but everybody can do something. And there is some policies and opportunities that we can move forward with this to make it better.
And we see that, we see your graphic there. You are former director of the Office of Youth Violence and Prevention. Jeff?
Yes.
Well, we see Senator Lou Frederick standing by, and we see Pastor Hennessee as well among some of our other guests. And I'm struck with 20 years ago, both of you gentlemen were on a similar town hall that I was hosting where we talked about this very issue. And here we are again. And I guess, Senator Frederick, I'll start with you. Why haven't we seen this change? It's not just been years, it's been decades.
Well, Jeff, it's actually 40 years ago that we started talking about this, because we didn't go back to the possum incident that took place in Portland as well. And people in Portland can actually go back even further than that. We have seen 40 years and more of promises that we would see the policing of the police. And the problem we've had is that there's a culture that has been allowed to continue that has not allowed the kind of accountability that we needed to have for police. That's what's gone on. And that culture has been very effectively stopped some of the proposals, the plans, the efforts of people like Pastor Hennessee and CJ Robbins and Keith Edwards and a whole series of others that have attempted to try to change that culture. But it's a culture within the police. It's a culture, it's our own society that says that there's certain things that are more important, that it is important to for instance, make the police look as intimidating as possible rather than as approachable as possible. It's a culture that says that military approach to how we deal with the rest of the community is the way that we should be dealing with each other. That's not the way it is, but that's what our culture has encouraged and supported over and over. And frankly, I've got to say, it's also been the fact that even though we've covered these issues and we've seen lots of media on this, we have not seen the solutions and the other things supported in the way that they could. That's also an issue that we really need to deal with.
I'd like to throw this question out to Pastor Hennessee. What do you think it is about this particular incident that has triggered such a national outcry? And we've also seen protests overseas as well.
First of all, I want to thank you, both Ken, you and Jeff and KOIN,
and our participants for the fact that we're even having this conversation. I'm grateful that you all see the importance of this investment of time today. I would say that part of what is so compelling about this moment, because we've all been here before for a long time, as Jeff was saying earlier, is that in part, there is, without that video, I'm not convinced that this would be where it's at. And I hate to say that, but the reality is, you can't watch that video and see this person, this police person, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds or so, have his knee on a man's neck, begging for air, and his accomplices standing there, hearing what the crowd has to say. This man is dying in front of everyone, and this guy's face never changes. It's amazing to me that nothing in his face changed. And what this is, in my opinion, is a metaphor for what America has done. This country has done to people who are less than or perceived to be. And honestly, I think people have finally come to the point of seeing what ugliness and what the sin and scourge of racism looks like, and even white people are embarrassed by it. And I think it's important for all of us to say this moment cannot pass. We have to do something and make sure we never see anything like this ever again.
Pastor Hennessee, thank you. CJ Robbins is a coordinator for Black Male Achievement. CJ, thank you for being on our panel. CJ, some folks say after this, policing in America will never be the same, but I ask the question to you, will it? Will it be the same after this, or will we change it?
Well, thank you for that question. And I just, like Pastor Hennessee, want to make sure that I show my gratitude for being here today, for the fact that you all put this panel together. I thank KOIN. This is an important and critical conversation that we're having right now. And I really want to lift up some of the things that the other panelists have already said. And so, you know, changing the culture of the police, but also our culture generally in this country is critical. So I want to lift up Pastor Hennessee, and having said that, and I want to lift up Antoinette Edwards as well. I'm sorry, I want to lift up Senator Frederick, and having said that, and I want to lift up Antoinette Edwards as well, and saying that we can't have casual acceptance, right? That's not that's part of our culture here in Oregon, and we have to ask the question. Everyone has to ask the question: what did I do? What can I contribute? And what did I contribute to not just George Floyd losing his life, but all of the lives that were mentioned. To your specific question, I don't think that this changes whatsoever if there's no action. If there's no action that follows the action of folks moving out into the streets, right? People are putting their bodies in harm's way at a time when we have a pandemic, when they literally their risk is through the roof just by stepping outside of their home. So first, it requires that those who are in power listen. Any of us that has any power, listen, and remembering that you lead from where you stand, right? So you do have some power no matter who you are. So I would say that, and I would also say that a message, and that you'll hear this reverberated from me throughout this conversation, is that it's time that we as Black people connect, and that other races stop being or feeling threatened when we do connect. So my main charge for us is for us as a people. We need to connect. We need to genuinely connect in as many ways as we possibly can and unite our power.
I'd like to direct this next question to LAKAYANA DRURY from Word is Bond. And your organization actually works with police officers to establish the kind of relationships that CJ was talking about. So just tell me what's going through your mind during this period of time as a young Black man in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So for us, what's going on is a two-pronged piece of this. My immediate reaction is to our young men who are continuing to be vulnerable, and that realization. I'm not a parent, but I have a very similar feeling of that powerlessness, not to be able to protect them as all of this is going on, and doing my best to answer their questions and reassure them in a system that I really can't reassure them in, that their safety is guaranteed to the best of my ability. But we're also on the ground mobilizing for our 4th annual summer internship, where we'll be working with police officers and really questioning what does that mean in the time of the death of George Floyd, and how are we going to engage with those officers this summer. And it's a two-pronged approach, right? Because there's the interpersonal, which is what this internship focuses on. It's really a 6-week intensive internship, or excuse me, training opportunity for these officers. But beyond just the training is also the policy change that has to happen. And so our young men were on the phone with Sheriff Mike Reese the other day, and he invited us to have a conversation about what are those policy changes that need to happen. We spoke also with Portland Police leadership as well to look at those policy changes. So it's a two-pronged approach to this, an interpersonal and a policy level that this has to be on. And that's where we're focusing our efforts right now.
Is there accountability for police officers? So many avoid any punishment when things like this happen. In the piece that I did, the don't smoke 'em, choke 'em officers, they were reinstated. Officer Frashauer went on to be a police trainer. In fact, he's still with the Portland Police Bureau today. That was in the Aaron Campbell case. How do we get accountability for police when they do something egregious?
Well, there is a whole list of ideas there that we're dealing with. The first thing that we're going to be doing, I think, when we have our special session in the Oregon legislature here shortly, will be to deal with the arbitration issue. The reason that some of these folks have been reinstated is because their case went to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator decided to not pay attention to the kinds of discipline that the city had suggested, which included being released. It's also an issue of tracking folks who have a history of problems. Those are the kinds of things that we also need to be looking at. And we need to be understanding as well what happens when somebody comes into the force and understands, you know, what they need to be able to do and what they should be doing and how they should be approaching things. We passed a bill in 2019 that requires a psychological screening for all police officers in the state. That wasn't the case before. A few departments had it, but the rest of the state did not. We need to continue to look at these issues. I have a whole list of things to try to deal with accountability, but it's going to come down to a fact that who ends up paying those huge awards that you talked about? Let's be real clear. It's the insurance company that ends up paying the awards. It's not the city. It's certainly not the police or the police union or whatever. The people who end up paying those awards are the city now, or not, is the insurance company. So there's not an impact on that situation. We have to address that in some way.
You know, one of the most incredible pieces of news to come out of the George Floyd death is the fact that the officer, with his knee on his neck, 17 times had been written up. 17 times. They obviously had some policy in place, but no one acted on that policy. Where was the point where they say you can no longer be a police officer? But it's not just Minneapolis. We see that in other cities as well, including here in Portland.
Jeff, there's another aspect to that too. In many cases, he was considered the alpha police officer. He was considered one of the best ones that they had on the force because of the way he had been treating other folks. So we have to address that particular approach as well. That if you are abusing folks, that's not showing great police work. That's showing bullying. That's showing a lack of understanding of the human people that you're working with. That's showing a kind of approach that says, I'm going to intimidate people, and that's how I'm going to work as a law enforcement, as a public safety person. We have to change that attitude as well.
Yeah, I think that this is a great question, because if you talk to some people in the police bureau who've been there for a while, they'll tell you they've had accountability issues and they have been disciplined and everything else. I think the issue is both what you've said, Jeff and Ken, about those who may, on the one hand, have a number of issues going on. There needs to be some real work done on that. There needs to be coordination with the union, coordination with the command staff, coordination with the various levels of review that are done in terms of citizen review and other, because we have that. We have an independent police review group, all of those things. And to me, for the most egregious ones, I have a lot of faith, at least more faith today in the criminal justice system beyond the police bureau, is it too oftentimes, as Senator Frederick said, it's either arbitration, mediation, or grand jury system basically says if you feel threatened, then you can, everything is, the officers let off the hook. And my concern, and I'm grateful for the fact that somebody had their video going, is this in Minneapolis very well have been the same thing where somebody tried to write a report and said, I felt threatened by a man who's on his stomach, is handcuffed behind his back. Thank God there are pictures of it so that that could not be used.
And has that changed the game here? The fact that now everybody's got a cell phone. Anybody can take pictures. Anybody can come up on an event and record it. We're seeing things that many people say have been happening the whole time.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
I would just add to that too, going back to the point about the officer with the 16 infractions, I think Senator Fredericks mentioned the National Registry, but I would also say if you have 17 infractions, there are officers within that bureau that know that you are probably not fit to be an officer. And I'm asking officers who are watching this or listening to this, you have to help hold your fellow officers accountable. There's no way that whoever is working with this man this shift did not know those signs, did not see that. And they have to realize that when you are an officer and you see someone else that is displaying signs that of inappropriate behavior or comments, that by not saying anything, you are potentially jeopardizing someone's life. In the same way that those officers who stood by and watched him sit on George Floyd were held accountable, we need to also realize you have to hold your fellow officers accountable. And we cannot live behind a code of silence. And if there needs to be protection to protect officers from within to be able to whistleblow on their fellow officers, then maybe that's something we need to look at. But I don't understand why officers aren't saying something about fellow officers that are displaying signs of misconduct and inappropriate behavior.
I know.